Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and this is My Life as a Landlord. I am so excited for you educating yourself by listening to this podcast. When most folks hear about rentals or when most folks hear about rentals or landlording, many groan in frustration. Some sidestep the subject altogether, but my guest today approaches rentals and life in general with purposefully seeking happiness. I am so excited to bring this guest to you today. Here to talk with me about the 8 bad moods in his new book, Good Mood Revolution, is Matt O'Neill. Hi, Matt.
Dr. Jen, what's happening?
Oh, it has been a busy, busy time. And I told you before, we've been nominated for an AMBI for an award in broadcasting for My Life as a Landlord podcast. Thank you very much.
Well deserved. Well deserved. It's one of the best podcasts in the world.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate it, and I'm excited to teach more and more people these lessons. And I always say it's warts and all. You know, we don't have a big editing crew. We just go. So happy to have you, Matt. And happiness and landlording doesn't always mix. And so when you and I were talking about how on earth can happiness and landlording go together, how does that work? How do you see it work?
Well, I am a landlord and I have multiple properties and I focus on happiness every day. So this is the thing is that anything can be frustrating. We can always focus on the negative. We can always focus on the downside. We can focus on the problems. And when we do that, we're going to be upset and we're not going to be happy. But why are we a landlord in the first place? What is the point? Why do we own property? The whole point of owning property is to build wealth. That's what I would say. And then what's the point of building wealth? Why do we want to build wealth? Well, for our financial future. Well, what's the point of having a great financial future? Well, when I feel like I'm going to have a great financial future, I feel secure. Okay, why do we want to feel secure? Because when I feel secure, finally I feel good about myself. Okay, that whole line of thinking, every single thing we do is to feel good. So if in the moment, the thing we're doing that ultimately we want to make us feel good at some point in the future isn't making us feel good now, we're doing it wrong because the future doesn't exist, only now exists. The only time we can feel good is now. 10 years from now, it will still be now. And if I don't learn how to be happy now with problems and challenges as a landlord and with my tenants messing things up and things needing to be fixed and this problem happening and termites and water damage and all the different things that can happen to properties, if I don't learn to be happy with the chaos of life now, then I won't be happy 10 years from now when I think I will, because I won't know how to do it. So I teach people how to do it.
I think that's amazing. My husband and I are big proponents of education, and we've talked about podcasts and we've talked about different education shows. And I remember going to Tony Robbins once, and he said, it's not that you're having to take the call from the tenant about a broken toilet. It's that you get to take the call. You get the privilege to solve this problem. And is a leaky toilet a big problem to solve? It may be inconvenient, and so you flip the perspective. So tell us how you look at this. I know when last we spoke, you were using words like primary results, secondary results, and different efforts. And I love this layers of onions that you peel back. And when you're applying this to landlording, happiness again, still it's just this perspective, but the way that you do it is so interesting. Tell us more about how you look at primary and secondary look efforts with landlords.
Well, I've got a really beautiful story that, as you're talking about Tony Robbins, this is a story that is not one of his, but it reminds me a lot of his teachings. And Tony is such a great guy. He's the one that's saying life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. So the leaky toilet isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And why would being frustrated about a leaky toilet happen for you? You choose. Well, how could this be for me? That's a really great question to ask. Or, I have to deal with this instead of I get to deal with this. Why do we get to deal with a leaky toilet? Because we're one of the freaking privileged in the world that can own a rental property. We're one of the wealthiest people on the planet because we own more than one home. That's why we get to have first world, awesome, wealthy people problems, right? And it's not even a problem. It's a wealthy person opportunity that we get this privilege of doing this. So here's a really fun story. When we wake up and we didn't sleep well. So last night, this is a true story. Last night, I went out to dinner with some friends and we ordered really rich food. I had a filet mignon and it was a Wagyu beef filet mignon. It was probably the best steak I'd ever had. And we got a rich chocolate dessert. Well, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm trying to sleep, but my stomach just doesn't feel good, right? It was too much richness. And I have a huge company address today. So I wake up at 2 in the morning. I can't go back to sleep. And I know that I need to be on my A game. I see the clock at 2:30 and then 3 and then 3:30. And now I'm like, maybe I'm going to be up all night and my kids are going to be awake by 6 o'clock and I've got 4 of them and I need to take care of them. So my whole day at that moment could have started out literally on the wrong foot. When we don't sleep well, we tell ourselves a story. The story is I'm tired. I didn't sleep well. I'm tired. And then if I had followed that story into today, I'm tired. And then maybe I could have bombed my company address. I didn't because I don't tell these stories to myself anymore. But let's just pretend that somebody listening has had a poor sleep night and then they're telling themselves that they're tired. And then they do something at work and it doesn't go well and somebody's rude to them. And then they feel even more grumpy and curmudgeon. And then they're even more upset. And then they're like, man, this whole day, I just can't wait to get home. And then they get home and what are they doing because they're tired? They snap at their significant other. And then then they snap back. And then now the kids are screaming and like, you are exhausted. Life feels like this total grind, right? And then you get the call and it's the toilet's leaking. And you just want to blow up about how awful life is. And so you just lay down, just like, I can't even deal. I have no energy to deal. And then the phone rings again and you're like, who wants to bother me now? We pick it up and somebody says, we've been trying to get in touch with you. You are the winner of the lottery. You just won the $100 million jackpot. What happens to the tiredness?
Gone.
Gone. You're hooting and hollering and jumping and high-fiving and picking your kids up and throwing them in the air. And like, you're like, who cares about that toilet? We'll buy them a whole new gold-plated toilet. Like your whole attitude just changes, right? All this energy comes into you. But before that moment, we were dog tired and life was awful. So what changed? It's not the money. The money might not even be real. This could be a hoax. The energy would come if it was a hoax or it wasn't, if we believed that it was real. So where does energy come from? Where does happiness come from? Where does joy come from? Where does tiredness come from? This is really important to understand. When we say we don't like something, we block the flow of energy. So when we resist something, when we're negative about something, for instance, sleep. If I had chosen to be negative about me not sleeping, I would have blocked the flow of energy. I would have lost joy. I wouldn't have been happy, and I wouldn't have been able to perform today. If a toilet is leaking in one of my rentals and it's going to cause maybe $10,000 of damage because the tenants didn't tell me, and it now has soaked the whole subfloor, and I got to change some footings because it's sagging now, and these are the things that happen, right? As I'm hating that, I'm blocking the flow of energy. Anything we resist, we block the flow of energy. But the difference when we thought we won the lottery is that we said, I love reality. The leaky toilet's still there. I didn't sleep well. That's still there. I still got in a fight with my wife. I still had all of that's still my reality, but I love reality so much at this point that I have all this energy. So here's the trick to being happy. Love reality. Every single day, you can be a lottery winner. I think back 20 years ago, if I could have seen a glimpse of today's life, of who I am today, of my wife, of my children, of the house we live in, of the rental properties that we own, if I could have seen the book that I've published, if I could have seen the podcast where I get to tell people how to be happy all the time, I would say, holy cow, I won the lottery. I would have been like, Dude, are you kidding me? 20 years from now, I get to be that guy. I get to have all of that. I am a lottery winner. So every single day you can look at your life and you can say, this is the life I dreamed of. These rental properties that are a pain in my neck, they're the rental properties that I pined for. These children that are a lot of work, they're the children that I prayed for. The significant other that's driving me crazy today, that's the person that I wanted so much to say yes when I asked her to marry me. So the secret to being happy is to love reality. And we do that just by choosing to love our reality. And when we notice we're not loving it, any moment we notice we're not loving it and we've slipped into negativity, all we have to do is recognize it and say, I'm not loving reality right now. And that's where the 8 bad moods come into play that I talk about in my book. We're just believing one of the lies of the 8 bad moods, and we can get out of that.
Matt, thank you so much for that. And it just it sounds hard, but it's also simple. And for my listeners who've just been amazing on the podcast, they know that I talk a lot about awkward conversations, and we're huge fans of let's get these awkward conversations out as quickly as possible. We're finding a lot of landlords, particularly on social media, avoid awkward conversations. They go to social media asking for the words on how to say awkward things, whether they not want to non-renew, or someone's misbehaving, or there's an eviction in motion, or there's some kind of confrontation. And so how can you choose to love reality knowing that you're dreading this awkward conversation for a landlord, that's reality of the day. That is what many self-managing landlords have to do. And even
Right.
property managers, they have to have these awkward conversations. So how do you spin an awkward conversation into loving reality?
This is a fun question. And I think the name awkward conversation is very appropriate for the conversation. And it also can lead us to say, this is going to be awkward, but it doesn't have to be. Uh, I think I think another how I would frame it, because I do believe our language paints our reality, it paints how we see it. I would frame it as, I'm going to have a compassionate conversation.
Compassionate. Okay.
And now that's not going to resonate with everyone. So awkward conversation is going to resonate because they're going to understand this. For me, though, at this point and where I am in my journey, I would call it a compassionate conversation. I'm compassionate toward myself and toward the person that I need to have it with. And that just knowing that, now my word is, okay, I get to have a compassionate conversation today. So I'm going to go to my tenant. I'm going to say, hey, rent, you haven't paid rent on time. This is the 4th month, and we're going to non-renew your lease. And I know that that's going to be really hard. That if I'm coming with them with compassion and compassion for myself, already my tone is saying, hey, I care about you. And at the same time, I have standards and I have rules. And if I've really been compassionate, I've communicated those rules. Now, if I haven't communicated the rule, if I've just allowed them to pay late 4 months in a row and I haven't said, hey, if you don't start paying on time, I'm not going to renew. Now I'm not really in integrity if I say I'm kicking you out for this. And that would feel, to me, that would feel bad. So I might, if this is the first time I'm going to decide I'm going to kick them out, I might give them a little bit of grace. At this point, if this is my first time having this compassionate conversation, I would go to my tenant and I would say, hey, you haven't paid rent on time for 4 months. That doesn't work for me. I'm sure there's circumstances that are preventing you from doing this. I'm not going to renew the lease for a full year. I'm going to give you 90 days. If you can pay rent on time for the next 90 days, then we'll talk about possibly doing a 12-month lease. If this doesn't work for you, if this arrangement doesn't work, we can part ways now. It's totally fine. But I've got to let you know where my standards are and what I expect. And also, I want to make sure that I'm being fair in my communication with you. So does it take strength to be able to approach somebody when giving them news that they don't want to hear? It does. But if you actually care about the other human being and you care about yourself, you know that avoiding this awkward conversation or this compassionate conversation is just going to lead to pain for them and pain for you. And it's just delaying and inevitable. It's like putting your head in the sand. What good does it do to just put your head in the sand? So we just need to get after it sooner than later, but do it with compassion. What I've found, we've had so many of these conversations. I've had them with employees that work with me, with tenants, with because we also have a real estate brokerage, with crazy homeowners, with people that literally have lost their minds. And we approach all of them the same way, with compassion. What happens? First, they're still angry as a hornet's nest, right? They're angry. But my energy, for whatever reason, the energy that we're approaching it, where we actually do care about this human being. We're not all self-centered just about what's going on in our life, but we do have our standards. They feel it. And the really, really crazy ones, maybe they don't all the way come around, but 99% of the people we talk with, by the end of the call, say, thank you. I'm glad I'm being heard. And also because our decisions are fair. We don't have people going on and hating us. If we do have an awkward conversation and we create resentment, it's not good for us. It doesn't feel good to do something that creates resentment. If I give somebody the rules and they break them, they typically are smart enough to say, yeah, I didn't uphold my end of the bargain.
Wow. Well, tell us more about your book that you've got, Good Mood Revolution, and how that plays into your podcast, which I know you're just getting going. Yeah.
Yeah, Good Mood Revolution is the name of the podcast, and
Oh, good.
thankfully
Okay.
and the book, and thankfully at this point it's become a top 2% global podcast, and so it's just taking off, and it's so fun. Every week I get to talk about how to feel good, and the book Good Mood Revolution is it just teaches us how to get out of these 8 negative moods. So one of the concepts I wanted to teach landlords today, one of the biggest negative moods is criticism, and it comes from pride, and judgment, guilt. The two of the 8 negative moods are guilt, which when we feel guilty, like we don't like some aspects about ourselves, we project that onto other people as judgments and criticisms. Also, when we feel prideful, like I'm better than people, and we look down on somebody, perhaps our tenant, that's a negative mood, because we're judging or criticizing them. So I teach a very simple process I learned from Byron Katie about how to stop judging and criticizing. What ultimately feels best is knowing that any advice I have for someone else, so anytime I'm criticizing, like, hey, that person should be better, that's really just advice for me. It's not for them. It's all any we just If I project outward onto somebody with this criticism, like, man, these people, they're such slobs. They don't take care of the property. They're awful. They're so lazy, right? Whatever our judgment is, that judgment isn't about them. It's about us. I'm so lazy. I'm such a slob. I don't want to damage property. That's good advice for me. Now, all I have to do is uphold my standards. If people don't like treat my property the way that I want them to treat it, then I'm going to have that same compassionate conversation and say, I'd really love for you to stay. And I have standards about who gets to stay. So I need you to hold the property at this level of condition. And if you don't, we just can't renew. And I'll give you lots of heads up so you can find a new place. But this is so much nicer than calling them lazy and slobs, as we cannot be happy and judging at the same time. It's impossible. There's no way you could criticize somebody and call them a slob, lazy, bad tenant, whatever even little tiny judgment we have. There's no way you can judge and criticize somebody and be happy at the same time. So how we get around this is, as we say the judgment, I think that person's a slob. We're like, okay, wait a minute. Matt told me that I can't be happy and judging at the same time. All you do is you say, that's advice for me. I don't want to be a slob. How are there times sometimes that I'm a slob? Well, man, my wife is like, I always have toothpaste on my shirt. It's like, it's a real thing for me. There's always toothpaste on my shirt. And then sometimes she's like, it's so interesting, honey. You can find your way to get the dishes into the sink, but the dishes have to go all the way into the dishwasher. And so maybe I'm a little bit sloppy about where I place my dishes, and maybe that makes me a little bit of a slob. Once I start to take my own advice I wanted to give them and realize it's not about them, I gain my happiness back.
Take your own advice. That's amazing. That's very cool. That's very cool. Well, if a listener is interested in contacting you, listening to your podcasts, reading your book, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way is just to plug into the Good Mood Revolution podcast. You know, our listeners are already listening to one of the best podcasts in the world by someone who's up for an Ambie Award, Dr. Jen. And if you're looking to add a second podcast to your repertoire and you just want to feel happier every week, check out the Monday episodes of Good Mood Revolution, where we just talk about being happy. And at that point, if you really vibe with what we do, there's ways to get more plugged in from there.
Pretty amazing, Matt. Thank you so much for having the time and choosing reality, choosing to love reality and being on the show. Any parting words for our landlord listeners?
Yes. The simplest way to be happy is to be kind.
Love it.
Kindness is king when it comes to happiness. And we know this. If you hold the door for somebody, what do? You smile, right? When we smile at someone or we give them a compliment, how do we feel? We feel really good.
Mm-hmm.
When you're kind to your tenants as a landlord, when you're kind. And I'm not saying we have to be kind to ourselves too. So that's where standards are really important. But when we're kind, we're happy. And that's just the simplest. I know this to be such a truth that when you walk in my office in big, bold red letters, it says kindness right on the wall. And in my house, on the wall, it says O'Neill's are kind. This isn't a selfless thing. It's not like I'm kind for their benefit. No, I'm kind for my benefit. And so my just simplest advice is make kindness your way of being, and it's going to be a very happy life.
Fantastic. I love it so much. Listeners out there, go check out Good Mood Revolution, both podcasts and the books, so you can apply all the great things Matt talked about today and choose happiness in your landlording life. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, hang on.